It's November 18th, and it is time to start the varnish process. So I'm going to push the boat out of the garage. I'm going to lightly sand the entire thing. And then I'm going to clean all of the sawdust off of the boat, take it out of this cradle, and then and only then will we start to varnish. This will take a little bit of time. Going to do several coats of varnish, and I'll show you that when we get to it. But for right now, I'm just going to push the boat out and lightly sand everything so that the varnish has something to stick to, and then I'll begin the varnishing process. If you've done any woodwork, you know the pain of getting a finish on and then having to scuff it to put another coat on, and that's what we've done here. The epoxy resin was on, it looked good, but we have to varnish it, and we have to varnish it because the epoxy resin will yellow and get brittle in ultraviolet light, so we have to protect the epoxy resin, and we're going to do that with varnish. And for the varnish to have something to stick to, you have to scuff the epoxy resin up. And that's what I've done here. I've also cleaned it off really well, got the dust off, tack clothed it so that all of the dust is gone, and now I'm mixing up varnish, and I'm using Epipane varnish, and I'm going to thin it. And this first coat will be thinned at 50-50 according to the directions on the varnish. I mixed up 5 ounces of, well, 2.5 ounces of the varnish, 2.5 ounces of the thinner, and I was able to finish half of the hull. And mixing up another batch so I can finish the rest of the hull. So this is diluted to a 50-50 mixture, and after I roll it on, I tip it off with that badger hair brush, and that's to try to smooth things out and then allow the varnish to flow and find its own setting, I guess you could say. So this first coat is really thin at 50-50, and then, like I said, I'll come back in another day and put a second coat on, and it will be thinned to even less. It'll be about a 30% thinning, and then down to a 15% thinning. And I'll sand lightly in between coats and get the dust off before I put the next coat on. Trying to think what else I can say about it at this point. Oh, I know what I wanted to talk about. The varnish dries. I shouldn't say dry. It begins to set very quickly. So as I was tipping off from the center of the hull towards this end is already starting to set. So when I come back and do that end, I'm not going to tip off all the way down. I'll tip off about 1/3 of the way down, because the varnish starts to set up or gum up pretty quickly, and once you drag your brush through that, you've ruined it. So trying to get this mixed up pretty quick. Let me go ahead and work on that. Day 2 of staining, and yesterday I think I mispronounced, not staining, varnishing. And yesterday I believe I mispronounced the name of the varnish. I'm using Epiphanes, I think is how the pronunciation goes, not Epiphanes. The varnish yesterday was mixed at 50-50, and today it's 25%. Yesterday it went on like a dream, and I've sanded it with 220 grit sandpaper and cleaned it off again. And I'm ready to roll on the next coat and then tip it off. The temperature outside has been really kind of chilly here in New Jersey, and as a consequence I've been running a space heater in my garage to kind of keep the temperature in the garage up around 60-65, and it's done a pretty good job of that. The recommended curing temperature for this is 24 hours at 65 degrees with low humidity, and we've been fortunate that we've had low humidity here the last few days. So this is mixed, I think I already said at 25%. We're trying to mix it in really well. The brush thinner and the varnish. And the brush thinner, what it does is it allows the varnish to flow and takes care of some of the imperfections that you have when you apply it. You could just roll it on. I don't know how that would look, but the recommended technique, as far as I know, is to tip it off. And I've been using a badger hair brush for that. One of the videos I watched on YouTube, and there are a lot of videos on YouTube, recommended a badger hair brush for the tip off. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. And that looks pretty good. It is amazing how messy this is. Just amazing. I don't know. I tend to make a mess of things anyway, but I'm just really amazed at how messy varnish it is. Sticky, tacky, everything. So hopefully this goes on as well as the first coat. It's really important that you get as much of the dust or whatever off when you're sanding between coats, because it's just going to show through. Now, one of the things I learned yesterday as I move down into this area is that I move quicker if I do what's the bottom right now, and then come back and grab some of the varnish from the top and bring it down the sides. And you don't really want to press hard on the roller, because you're not trying to squeeze the varnish out, you're trying to lay the varnish on. It's better to do multiple thin coats than it is a heavy coat when it comes to this. At least that's what I've read. So you'll be able to watch here. I like to come down along the bottom. Good coverage down here. Back and forth up front, but then in here I'm going to start pulling varnish from the top. Now, I read somewhere that one person had put the second coat on and it never dried. And I've been worried about that, to be honest. And this is the second coat, so we'll see what happens tomorrow. But like I said before, the first coat went on like a dream. Took about 10 ounces total. And I did it in 2 separate pours. So when you tip off, you want to go from dry to wet. And on this one, it's pretty easy because I can go all the way to the end. But as I get going, I'm not going to be able to work into this area because it's going to start getting tacky. I think I talked about that yesterday. So when I get to that point, I forgot something. When I get to that point, it'll be important to lift the brush so that I don't get a hard stop in the varnish. And I don't know how else to explain that, but maybe I can show you. When I get going down here and I'm coming this way, I'm going to have to come down. I'm going to have to lift the brush up like a feather. But you don't want to do this because then you've got varnish stop right here and it will just like pool up almost like a wall and leave a line. And this is already starting to thicken up a lot quicker than it did yesterday. So that lets me know how the rest of the day is going to go. So up here I'm pressing kind of hard to unload the roller, but then as I go down over here, I don't, because I'm not interested in unloading the roller as much as I am putting a thin coat of varnish on the boat. And it's important that you keep a wet edge. And I'm going to go ahead and tip this off instead of going right to the other side. So come in and we lift gently. As I get into the first part, I'll lift gently on the brush so that it blends, if you will. And you really do need to move quick. So once you start, you really need to go. You can't be taking your time to do things that you should have done ahead of time. I don't know how else to describe that. But you want to get all your prep work done. You don't want to get to this point and go, oh shoot, I missed a spot. Now you just want to keep rolling. And one of the reasons why you don't want to like force or press hard down in here is you don't want drips. And varnish flows. Not quite like water, but it flows. And if you're pressing hard and you unload your roller in here, you're going to get big, long drips. You don't want to mix up too much varnish at this point, because the varnish can start getting tacky in there. Certainly not a professional at this, and if this is all screwed up, I may have to go back and redo or cut this part of the video. But it's going pretty well, at least what I expect, and hopefully what I expect isn't too far out of the norm. Kind of wish I could do this out in the sun, but it's cold outside. And multiple thin coats. Multiple thin coats. Better than a thick coat. From dry to wet. Tip from dry to wet. If you listen to your brush, you can hear if there's a spot that's missing varnish. kind of makes a rasping sound. So like right in here, I'm missing varnish, so I'm kind of going back and forth with whatever I've tipped off and trying to unload that into that spot without taking too much time. If you're too heavy on the roller, the other thing that can happen is you have marks going this way and you have to tip a lot more to get those marks out. Kind of like think about painting a wall with a roller. You don't want to go in multiple directions. You want to basically have the paint going all in one direction. A little worried right in here. It looks like it might have dried too much over there. But again, keep it moving. Keep it moving. So this is another 10 ounces to cover the boat. Remember, the first one was a 50-50 mixture, so 5 ounces of varnish. This is 7.5 ounces of varnish. And the next one will be 8.5 ounces of varnish. 21 ounces of varnish and 5 ounces, 2.5 ounces, 1.5 ounces, 9 ounces of the brush thinner. Now you may hear people talk about putting 6, 7, 8 coats of varnish, but they're going onto bare wood. Here we're just trying to provide UV protection for the epoxy resin. So you don't need 7 coats of varnish. That was a mistake that I made initially, thinking that that's what I was going to need. Also, the varnish, if you read the can, it's for above the water line. Well, obviously, what I'm doing right now is going to be below the water line. But all I'm putting it on for is UV protection. So down here, I don't want to grab the ends. I want to come in a couple of inches, and I want to tip that out in this direction towards the garage door. And the reason is I don't want my brush to catch the edge and unload on the edge. So now I'll come in a couple of inches as I tip off, and I'll gently blend that in. And I'll go back the other way. And again, the brush, I can't think of what it is. The purpose of it is to help the varnish flow. So you shouldn't have much problem with the brush strokes filling in and giving you a nice, even, shiny coat. And that's it. I don't know how long that's been running, but that's it. This is done. I'm going to come over and turn that off. And I've got some other things over here that I want to varnish, but we don't need to sit and watch that.